Today, we are diving into something that almost every ambitious woman that I know struggles with: time blindness. So, here's the thing: time blindness is not a moral failure, it is not a lack of discipline, and it's definitely not a reflection of how much you care. Time blindness is neurological and it's also a cultural experience. So, if you've been carrying around guilt around the fact that time feels slippery or maybe invisible, I want today's episode to give you both relief and a reset. We're going to talk about why your brain struggles to see time, how modern life makes it worse, especially for women, and three ritual based ways that you can begin externalizing time so that it becomes something that you can actually work with instead of something that you're constantly fighting. Let's do this. Hi, y'all. I'm Danielle McGue, and I help ambitious women pursue bold goals without losing themselves, even when life is banana pants. So today we're going to be talking about time blindness. And before we jump into this, a few things that I want to make sure are clear. One, I am a doctor, but I'm not the sort of doctor that studies ADHD, diagnoses ADHD, or any of that stuff. That being said, I have a learning disability that does affect my executive functioning skills, and lots of people in my life have ADHD, including people that I live with. Almost all of my clients are neurodivergent in some sort of way. I love brains. I think brains are super cool. One of the things that I've absolutely loved as a professor and now as a professor and a coach is that I really get interested in how people learn and trying to figure out their way of learning and how do I help them move through the world in a way that makes the most sense with their brain. And recently I had a client come to me, and one of their big issues was around time blindness. This is also something I navigate a lot with my kids and with my husband. And it occurred to me that as I was kind of helping all of them, that perhaps you all would benefit from some of this as well. So I want to begin by talking about why it is that you can't see time and why it's not your fault. Okay. If time keeps getting away from you, it's not because you're irresponsible or chaotic. A lot of people that have ADHD or ADHD adjacent tendencies, the brain doesn't naturally create a felt sense of time. So neuroscientists call this temporal myopia. I call it my brain thinks everything is now or not now, but this is not that your brain is broken, and it just doesn't necessarily process the flow of time in the same way that other brains do. But we also need to name a bigger context. High achieving women are not managing one timeline, they're managing seven. They're managing their kids' schedules, their work deadlines, their partner's calendars, school events, household logistic, aging parent, and somewhere down their list, their own time. So your brain's not just trying to track minutes, it's trying to track identities, responsibilities, expectations across multiple ecosystems. And of course, time feels slippery. Of course, transitions can feel abrupt. And of course, you feel late even when you are technically on time. This is not personal, it's structural, and it is absolutely not your fault. The second thing that I want to explain is that rituals, not rigid systems, are going to restore your sense of time. So the good news here is that there are things that, even if these things are structural, there are some individual things that we can do to sort of cope in these structures that are not necessarily built for us. And hopefully that gives us the energy to create some larger structural changes as well. I really believe that the self and the social are intimately and intricately connected, and that if we are going to create change, that we need to be doing that on both micro and macro levels, and that the best solutions actually integrate both and are not excluding either. So here's one thing that I want you to hear. You cannot change time blindness by thinking harder. What you can do is find creative ways to make time visible, tangible, and ritualized. Clock time is actually pretty abstract. Ritual time is very embodied. So what we don't need is more productivity hacks. What we need is collective rituals. We need shared structures. We need shared check-ins. We need shared rhythms that help us return to ourselves. When you are managing 7 calendars, you cannot rely on memory alone. You need touch points. You need anchors. You need processes to bring you back to your body. So we're going to look at 3 simple ritual-friendly ways to externalize time. So the first one is probably the one that you've heard the most of, and I have a few little tweaks to that. So one of the first ways to externalize time is to use visual timers. So we need to make time visible. So I'm from a funky field called performance studies, and it is a weird mashup of anthropology meets theater meets behavioralist psychology. One of the really interesting things about performance as we teach it is that when we perform things, we are making the invisible visible for people. And a lot of what I've been trained around is kind of thinking about how do we take invisible processes, how do we make them visible so that if we want to create any sort of change, we can't make change to things that we don't know exist, right? And so this is really us thinking about what are some ways that we can make visible time so that our relationship to time can change. So particularly if you have one of those cool neurospicy ADHD brains, you don't always feel time passing. So you need to show it. What I think is really helpful is to not use a timer on your phone, but use external timers that you can see, like ones that you can set on your desk that have a countdown, Pomodoro timers, or even maybe like an on-screen, your desktop timer, not on your phone. One, if you grab your phone, you're going to fall down a rabbit hole. But also like some of those, what happens is, people will say set timers, but then like what happens is you actually aren't seeing the time pass. So you aren't feeling it. You're just all of a sudden jolted when an alarm goes off. What we want to do is start teaching you the way that time feels as it's moving. Okay. So what you could also do is you could set these visual timers and connect it with a cue. So maybe you're lighting a candle, then you start a timer. Maybe you put on a playlist and then you set your cue. Maybe you make tea and then the countdown begins. This is going to be a beautiful little ritual by pairing it with something. Now you're telling your nervous system, we're entering a time container now. And afterwards, you can ask yourself, what did time feel like? Did it help me stay present? And again, this isn't necessarily about control here. This is about awareness. The second ritual that we can create to help us externalize time is to create time maps. And what we want to do is we want to give tasks shape. So when time is invisible, sometimes it can feel infinite. And when a task feels infinite, we want to avoid it because it's going to take us forever. So a time map is really a really quick 30-second ritual. It gives a task a beginning and an end. So you're going to write down 3 things as part of your time map. You're going to write down the current time, when you want to finish, and 2 to 3 steps between now and getting it done. So what we're really trying to do is draw some edges around your task. You can also make this a micro ritual. So before you start anything meaningful, I want you to just map the shape of it and think about it that way. If that makes it a little more tangible, to think like, I'm giving this task some shape. When am I starting? When am I finishing? And like, what are 2 to 3 steps inside of that I can add to it that's going to get me from one point to the next? This creates some psychological safety. It also tells your brain, you don't have to swallow me whole. There's a boundary. A lot of times too, the reasons that we procrastinate or we really feel stuck is because we don't know what those steps are. But if you take the time to kind of think through that at the start, then when you're in the messy middle of it, you can kind of just look and say, oh, I already decided this, and move on. Okay, so the third way that we are going to externalize time is by using a ritual around anchors. We're going to tie time to events, not necessarily the clock here. So a lot of times in traditional time management stuff, people will have you write down, when are you going to start this task? Oh, you have this task list. Go through your to-do list and mark what time you're going to start all of these things. I'm going to do this Monday at 10. I'm going to do this Tuesday at 3:30. And the problem is that I'll start at 10 o'clock is still too abstract definitely for ADHD brains, but for many other brains as well, especially brains that are carrying so much invisible load. What you can do is you can say something like, I'm going to start this after I finish my coffee. So drinking your coffee is an event, not necessarily a time. And a lot of time in behavior change research, you'll hear this called implementation intentions. So if I do this, then I'll do that. If I finish my coffee, then I'm going to start this project, right? Your brain can feel that event in a different way than sometimes it can feel that time. So these become anchors. After this meeting ends, then I'll do this. When my kids get on the bus, I do that. Once the dishwasher starts, I wipe down the countertops, right? What this does is these create these anchors that you kind of can turn these ritual rhythms into. So these anchors are kind of like the rhythm of your day, and they turn your environment almost like into your support system. So a way to maybe think about this is that women don't necessarily need schedule perfectionism. What we need is environmental choreography, right? So how do we use our environment to help us choreograph our time? All right, so to kind of finish this out, I want to talk about the community piece of this. I really truly believe this. We are not supposed to do this alone. Most women that struggle with their time don't because they're disorganized. They're struggling because they are functioning as an entire ecosystem. And ecosystems need community rhythms. We need shared check-ins. We need accountability partners. We need collective pauses. We need seasonal resets. We need weekly planning rituals and container moment. Time becomes easier when you have a circle doing it with you. This is why retreats matter. This is why group coaching matters. This is why planning rituals matter. You are not meant to hold 7 calendars in your head alone. Now, if you are looking for that community support, I have so many things that I am excited about coming up in 2026. I have some ways that you can engage in some yearly, where we can plan our years together. If you want, you can hop on and sign up for all the retreats so that you have a container to stay on track with your goals every single quarter. You can join a group coaching program called Simply Bold that I'm really excited about. I've been working so hard behind the scenes these last couple of months with. I'm so excited about it. If you want one-on-one coaching, if you're still looking for other ways, let me know. I would love to find the right container for you. Reach out, find me on LinkedIn, or go ahead and send me an email at support@plangoplan.com. And I would love to schedule a time to just chat with you, learn more about you, and figure out which kind of container would be the best one for you. If time slips away from you, if it feels like it melts or compresses or disappears, you're not alone and you're not doing it wrong. Your brain may not naturally see time, but with rituals, with external supports, with community rhythm, time becomes something that you can shape. And I want you to try one of these this week. Just one. You can make it gentle, you can make it sensory, you can make it yours. And I want you to explore the practices. And if you want to explore these practices inside a community of women who get it, where rituals aren't just encouraged, but they're built in, you know where to find me. Until next time, keep pursuing your bold goals without losing yourself, even when life is banana pants. You got this. Be bold, be balanced, be well, friends.